What's up everyone, and welcome back. In the past week, Linux got a major new kernel release. Debian's package manager picked up native rollback tools, Flatpak pushed out an important security fix, KDE shipped more desktop polish, France made a serious government-level Linux move, and Trisquel landed a new long-term release. So, if you want the short version of what actually matters this week, let's get into it. The biggest story is Linux 7.0, which officially landed on April 12th. Now, just to keep expectations realistic, this version jump does not mean Linux suddenly changed direction overnight. Linus Torvalds tends to roll the major version number after the X.19 cycle. So, the move from 6.19 to 7.0 is more about versioning rhythm than marketing. But the release itself is still very important. What matters here is the mix of new hardware enablement, general performance work, and reliability improvements. Coverage around the release highlights more Intel Nova Lake support, more Intel Accelerator bring-up, additional AMD graphics IP enablement, and self-healing capabilities for XFS. There's also better standardized I/O error reporting in the kernel, which is one of those changes you may never celebrate on social media, but you absolutely appreciate when something goes wrong and the system gives clearer information. There were also some late fixes right before release, including work around bogus AMD Zen 3 hardware errors and an X.509 certificate-related out-of-bounds issue. So overall, Linux 7.0 looks like a very solid platform release rather than a flashy one. And for a lot of people, the practical significance is simple. This is the kernel family that will help define the feel of upcoming distro releases, including Ubuntu 26.04 LTS. Next up, one of the most genuinely useful quality of life improvements this week came from the Debian side, because APT 3.2 is now stable. The headline feature is transaction history plus native undo, redo, and rollback support. In other words, APT now gives Debian-based users a much cleaner way to inspect what happened during package operations and reverse changes when needed. The key commands are history list, history info, history redo, history undo, and history rollback. If you've used DNF on Fedora, the idea will feel familiar. And that's why this matters so much. This is not one of those updates where the changelog is technically interesting but hard to feel. This one is immediately understandable. If an update goes sideways, or you just want clearer visibility into package transactions, APT is becoming a much more comfortable tool to live with. Debian seed users can get it now, and Ubuntu 26.04 LTS is also expected to benefit. Now, from package management convenience to package security, there's also a Flatpak update you really do not want to ignore. Flatpak 1.16.4 fixes 4 vulnerabilities, and the most serious one is CVE 2026-34078, described as a complete sandbox escape. In plain English, that means a malicious app could potentially break out of the sandbox, access host files, and execute code in the host context. That is the exact kind of failure Flatpak is supposed to prevent. So yes, this is a serious patch. There's no reason for drama here, but there is a reason to update quickly. If your distribution has already pushed the fix, install it. Flatpak's value proposition depends heavily on trust in the sandbox model, and this release is a reminder that sandboxing is never magic. It still needs careful ongoing maintenance. On the desktop side, KDE also had a pretty solid week with Plasma 6.6.4. This is a maintenance release, so think polish rather than reinvention. One of the more useful fixes reduces CPU and GPU load for full-screen windows in direct scan-out scenarios when the cursor is not present. KDE also improved a bunch of smaller but real-world details, like dragging recent items from launcher menus onto the desktop, more accurate update counts in Discover, and better behavior in console effects and task updates. There are also several stability fixes here that matter if you spend all day on a Linux desktop. KDE Wien got more protection against odd X-WLAN sizing behavior, multiple crashes were fixed, NVIDIA usage graphs saw correction work, and there's even an OBS Studio Crash fix in the mix. So Plasma 6.6.4 is exactly the kind of release you want from a mature desktop. Less noise, fewer weird moments, and better day-to-day behavior. The next story is less about a release and more about momentum, because France just made one of the most significant Linux desktop policy announcements we've seen in a while. According to reporting on a formal announcement from DINUM, France's Interministerial Digital Directorate, the country is moving Windows workstations toward Linux as part of a broader digital sovereignty strategy. The important detail here is that this is not being discussed like a vague experiment or a pilot project in one office. Ministries and public operators are being told to prepare plans by autumn 2026, and the broader scope goes well beyond the desktop into tools, security, AI, databases, virtualization, and network equipment. Now, we still do not know which distribution or distributions France will standardize on, so that part remains open, but the significance is obvious. When a large government frames Linux as a strategic sovereignty decision instead of just a cost-saving alternative, that tells you a lot about how the platform is being viewed at institutional level in 2026. And finally, for viewers who care about software freedom in the stricter GNU sense, Trisquel 12.0 arrived this week. Trisquel 12.0, codenamed ICNE, is based on Ubuntu 24.04 LTS, but it is aimed at a very specific audience. This is a distribution for people who want a system built entirely around free software without proprietary drivers, firmware, or the usual non-free extras many mainstream distros include for convenience. The main edition ships with MATI 1.26. There's also a KDE Plasma based Trisquel edition, and the release uses Linux Libre 6.8x with a 6.14x hardware enablement stack listed as well. This is probably not the distro most of you will install on your main machine tomorrow, and that's okay, but it does matter because it keeps the philosophical edge of Linux visible. Trisquel is a reminder that Linux is not just a product category or a desktop alternative. For some people, it is still about software freedom first, even when that means accepting tougher hardware trade-offs. So that's the week in Linux. Linux 7.0 is the big platform story. APT 3.2 is a very welcome usability win for Debian-based systems. Flatpak 1.16.4 is an upgrade you should do update. KDE Plasma 6.6.4 adds worthwhile polish. France's Linux desktop plan is worth watching closely, and Trisquel 12.0 gives the free software crowd a fresh long-term release. Let me know in the comments which of these actually matters most to you. Is it Linux 7.0, the APT rollback work, the Flatpak security patch, or that France desktop move? And if you want more Linux news without the fluff, subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.